Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Clearing the Air, What You Really Need to Know About Content Services in the Cloud. I'm Teresa Resick, Director of Webinars here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are Cheryl McKinnon of Forrester and David Jeunesse of IBM. IBM is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. As we get started, just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open, close, or resize the different windows. And across the bottom of the screen is the list of all of the widgets that are available to you. And group chat is available, and open that by clicking that icon that says group chat. And with this, you'll be able to text chat with each other and also with a few of us from here at AIIM. Do ask questions of the speakers throughout our time today using the Q&A feature. We will hold these questions until the end, where we should have 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. But you may also use this feature to ask for any technical assistance. You can download a PDF of the presentation at any time, something that I encourage you to do, because there's a lot of really good information coming up today. Just look for that in the resources list, and there's also some other links in there to help you learn more about today's topic. So just click in there at any time. That resource will open up in a new browser tab, and then you can save it and read it and have it to read after the webinar. At the end of the webinar, a brief survey will open in your browser, and it's also in the list of the widgets below the slide area. I would greatly appreciate it if you would take a few moments to offer your feedback and to suggest other topics for us to cover. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's resources webinars page in just a few days. Now I'd like to introduce the speakers we have with us today. Cheryl McKinnon is a principal analyst at Forrester, serving enterprise architecture professionals. She helps them support their firm's need for content and collaboration technologies for these capabilities in the age of the customer. Cheryl delivers research and advisory services in areas including enterprise content management, content archiving, enterprise file sync and share, document-centric collaboration, lifecycle management, information governance, and file analytics. David Jeunesse is a writer and public speaker who specializes in communicating the benefits of new technologies to business decision makers. At IBM, he develops the messaging strategy, writes executive speeches and videos, and produces IBM Live events. Prior to 2010, Mr. Jeunesse performed a similar role with capture pioneer DataCap for 12 years. So right now, I'm going to turn things over to Cheryl McKinnon to begin our discussion today. Cheryl?
Great. Thanks very much, and thanks again for the invitation to participate in today's session. I'm looking forward to a great conversation. So let's get started. This is a really interesting time in the broader content management, content services world, and I think if we look at a number of the disruptive trends that we've been seeing, cloud is certainly one of the things that has both forced rethinking of roadmaps, but also presented all kinds of really interesting new opportunities for customers of every size. So what I'll be talking about for the next approximately 15, 20 minutes or so, first off, the path to digital transformation and the importance of content and process as part of that. It really is one of those underpinning considerations as organizations develop maturity around their digital businesses. We'll then talk about some of the key trends affecting content in the cloud and wrap up with a couple of recommendations before I hand it over to my colleague at IBM. So let's get started. Now, Forrester Research takes in all kinds of both qualitative and quantitative data over the course of a typical year. We have some very large-scale surveys going out to thousands upon thousands of both business and technology decision makers every year around their priorities, their journeys, their software investments, their data and analytics trends. And I'm happy to share a lot of that information with you here over the next little while. We also like to take that step back every year and think about, what are those key imperatives that are out there in the market that are shaping how organizations make decisions about their businesses, about setting their priorities, and where they need to invest in technology to take them to the next level. So for 2018, we actually took a look at 6 key market imperatives, again, driven by both data that we get from our very large scale surveys, but then also the customer conversations and when they express, their concerns, their priorities. So the first thing that we see is that organizations increasingly want to be able to grow and drive revenue for their businesses by looking at customer experience. This is actually backed up by several years of data. In fact, for our last major survey, our Priorities and Journeys survey in late 2017, we actually went out to over 18,000 both business and technology decision makers. And when we asked what the top business objectives for the next year would be, number one, not surprisingly, was the desire to grow their business, grow their revenue, followed very, very closely by the requirement to improve their customer experience. And it's really interesting because over the last several years, that same survey did have improving customer experience as the number one objective. Now we see that organizations, having made some of those investments, are ready to capitalize on those investments and now want to grow their markets, grow their revenue. So that's really key. The second is really important as well. We know it's a very competitive market, and so organizations want to be able to differentiate themselves in their own industries, in their own regions, by investing in digital. And that means different things for different kinds of organizations. So, we'll focus on the role of content and how that is going to help to differentiate from a digital business perspective. We also know that organizations want to use customer insights to gain competitive advantage. And that means they need to be able to get their hands on data to make that decision, to get that insight, to tune and tweak how they go to market, how they operate internally, and how they serve their customers. But the important thing is they need the data to get the insights. And I think when we think about the world of unstructured versus structured content or data, we often do neglect content, that so-called unstructured information, as part of this contribution to the insights and data that we need for analysis. Fourth, organizations want to accelerate their growth with marketing innovation. Fifth, probably most relevant to some of us here, the need to transform IT, so their own technology organizations, to be better focused on winning, serving, and retaining customers. And of course, that does include the importance of empowering employees, having them get access to the knowledge and information they need to do their jobs in order to better serve those customers. And sixth, I think really relevant for 2018 and beyond, is the need to secure their customer information, protect both your brand as well as the clients that you serve. Some of the changing regulatory landscape that we see out there in terms of privacy regulation really kind of drives this point home. So these are the 6 key market imperatives that we see organizations facing in 2018 and beyond. So what does all of that mean for the content management market? We do know that this broader enterprise content management market is in transition. And whether we talk about content services, the rise of the content platform, on-premises shifting into cloud, we do see that organizations are rethinking their roadmaps and trying to look at opportunities to modernize, become more efficient, and again, more responsive to employees and customer needs as well. If we look around the last couple of decades, we do recognize that many large organizations, have never necessarily executed on that dream of the one repository to rule them all. We know that there's a lot of value in point solutions, being able to deliver content applications that serve the need of particular lines of business, particular use cases. And so we do see it's very typical that organizations have multiple systems and even often from multiple vendors. But we do see that this move to cloud continues to pick up steam. The adoption of cloud services in its various iterations, whether it's multi-tenant software as a service or more of a vendor-managed private cloud, we see that whole shift picking up steam continually. I think if we look around the overall market, I like to say that, the generational war has been won. We've been shifting to this world of more cohesive content platforms, if not cloud native, then cloud friendly, or they've been re-architected to work in the world of cloud infrastructure, take advantage of some of the flexibility, scalability, and innovation that we can see happen much more quickly in a cloud infrastructure than many of the on-premises infrastructure that many organizations are still relying on. But we do see that when I talk to content management decision makers, whether they're refreshing an existing program or looking to adopt something net new, we know that they're looking for more flexible platforms, things that are easier to deploy. So this shift from the on-premises, often assembled suites, meaning products that have been grown out through acquisitions, has now started to give way to more cloud-ready platforms, cohesively developed, modern APIs, powered by these granular content services. So we can deconstruct, the many, many features that we've always expected in the world of enterprise content management, but we can decompose those capabilities into services and just surface up the specific features or functions that we need in a content application, whether that's through web, through mobile, through an IoT experience, such as a car dashboard, or perhaps even another leading line of business application, like a CRM or ERP system. This is really the way that we see the market unfolding. So we see that the market is shifting to this modern content platform, more of a decoupling away from the monolithic stacks of the first generation of ECM to much more flexible platforms where we have more interoperability. We can interact with other line of business applications and often either other content management platforms. So we have this decoupling of the application layer, the repository layer, and of course we want more flexibility in how we expose these content services to our busy information workers. And so when we talk about a software platform at Forrester, we talk about this integrated set of software components, modular services that are then used to support other parties as they design, build, and run specific types of application logic. And so when we think about this content platform, this is kind of that modern expression of the next generation of content management. This is a software platform architected specifically for these document, content, and often process-rich applications. So revealing more of these services and APIs for application creation. They're cloud-friendly, if not cloud-native. To support integration and cross-system interoperability. And we start getting into a lot more flexibility in terms of how we design and deliver applications. We may not need a formal developer. We might be able to work with some of our line of business experts to map out content applications. Overall, though, we do see that the outlook for this market continues to be very healthy. Our data tells us that about 87% of current program leaders intend to continue investing in their programs, expanding deployments, rolling out new applications. The top drivers for investment today continue to be digitization of business process. That's been a perennial #1 driver for investment in this category of technology. And of course, better content sharing. Better search and better sharing also continue to be top of that list year over year in our data. But what's kind of interesting is that for our last survey year, we actually saw that user adoption had resurfaced as one of the top challenges facing content management programs. And I think if we take a look around the market, we are increasingly working with web, cloud-based applications, mobile-friendly, simpler user interfaces. And so user frustration for on-premises legacy systems perhaps that have not been kept current. They're a couple of versions behind. This is where we start to see a disconnect. And when we think about some of the advantages of going to cloud, the ability to stay current in terms of the vendor latest and greatest cutting-edge platform and investment in user experience, I think this is one of the areas we need to focus on to get that user adoption in order to get those particular cost savings or process efficiencies that we often articulated in the business case. You're not going to get those results if you're not getting the user adoption. And it's also interesting, even existing programs, over half, in fact 56% of the decision makers that we surveyed said that they wanted to rethink their business case for content management. So develop a new business plan, look at new objectives, new goals for that next phase of their investment. And the new outcomes that they're looking at are more related to outcomes related to knowledge sharing. So we're seeing almost that resurgence of interest in knowledge discovery and knowledge management, improved customer experience, and then, of course, perennially the requirement to continue to meet compliance obligations. So when we think about, the current content landscape, the migration challenges, are still quite large, even though we've seen, very distinct uptick in terms of shifting content management applications to various forms of cloud services. We still see that organizations have large volumes of files sitting out there on network drives. In fact, some recent research I published in the file analytics market revealed that over 61% of these data decision makers thought that they had more than 100 terabytes of documents and files sitting in their in-house network drive. So we're still in early stages in terms of shifting this very large-scale volume of content from on-premises storage environments into cloud. So there's still a lot of opportunity on the table here. You don't think of yourself as a laggard if you haven't made this move. A lot of information, a lot of organizations yet to move. And you know, I think also part of this challenge is it's hard to keep some of these older version 1 or generation 1 enterprise content management systems. It's often hard to keep them upgraded, keep them current, especially if they've been highly customized or deeply integrated with other line of business applications. So, you know, this challenge of migration certainly is real and needs to be planned for. So let's talk a little bit about some of the trends we're seeing in cloud adoption. I would say if I had to sum it up, what I'm seeing in the content management market is we're seeing much more of an embrace and extend cloud-based content management services complementing existing on-premises systems. It's not yet a rip and replace. We do expect that this will continue to happen in the future, much more cloud-first initiatives, but today we're seeing a lot more kind of surround and embrace than rip and replace. So what are some of the benefits in terms of content in the cloud? When we take a look at some of the data, not specific just to the content management market, but overall cloud adoption, the customers that we survey have a few very specific benefits that they're seeing. One is, you know, they're looking beyond cost as just a driver for cloud adoption. That might be one of the objectives on the table, the opportunity to decommission older systems or infrastructure, but it's not the end-all be-all. There's other benefits that actually hit the radar more. And the top benefits that organizations are getting out of cloud adoption are around things like agility, being more flexible, being able to stay current on the particular software platform without having to invest in a lot of upgrade and patching and maintenance internally, and faster delivery of just that current user experience, new features and functions, and productivity gains. So the ability now to roll out smaller but more frequent new capabilities, keep expanding their adoption capability, but faster iterations to stay current. So again, this is some of that data just to back up some of those comments. When we ask about broader cloud adoption, software as a service, these are the top goals and benefits that organizations are achieving. So cost reduction is certainly up there in the top two, but flexibility, agility, and better collaboration are all there as well. When we ask questions about, organizations that are resistant to cloud or hesitant, some of the top concerns that they express in terms of, hesitancy to move to cloud is making sure that they're looking for vendors that are well equipped to fight off any kind of threat, whether that's, cyber threat, whether that's phishing, whether that's, being able to hack into those cloud services. So these are the kinds of concerns and questions that organizations are getting much more sophisticated about, I would say. When I started covering this market about 5 years ago at Forrester, the tone of the questions I got about assessing the appropriateness and the security capabilities of a cloud provider, much more sophisticated kind of conversations today than even 3 or 4 years ago. The other concerns organizations have, and these are the kinds of questions that they're asking their prospective cloud providers, is, how do we know who's accessing the content? What are the policies in place to understand who at the vendor is able to view content, or what shielding is in place to make sure that no one is able to view content, or how is it logged if there is a requirement because of a technical support issue? So these kind of questions are being asked. And then, of course, outside of the security realm, the other kind of consideration they have is, well, what about my application integration? Do I need to rewrite an integration or rewrite a customization? That's also top of mind in terms of concerns about moving to cloud. What's interesting is that even if I look at some of the data from my pure cloud provider colleagues, when we ask the survey, why are you using public cloud services? Really interesting to see that file sharing and storage top public cloud uses. And this is even beyond the content management kind of market. This is just using public cloud services from the range of major vendors. And so a really interesting pattern over the last couple of years there. So back to the content management specific market. We do, again, many large-scale surveys. In this case, we did a survey of our software buying decision makers, and we've seen that over the last couple of years, this shift away from predominantly on-premises into kind of a mixed mode of hybrid and hosted is definitely where the pattern is moving to. So you'll see that between 2016 and 2017, we've actually shifted 8%, 30% in 2016, now down to 22% that are purely on-premises for content management. The big number now is hybrid, meaning a mix of on-premises applications as well as cloud-based applications. Hosted represents another big chunk of that market, so services offered by major vendors in terms of their content management platform in their own data center or in partnership perhaps with their own cloud provider. And then in terms of pure software as a service, multi-tenant, we're seeing that slowly climb up, and right now it's about 19%. We do think, though, software as a service is going to dominate over the next 1 to 2 years. So that tipping point, I think, is within the foreseeable future. And because we've been asking questions year over year, so where are you in terms of software as a service adoption? We see a lot more complement. So I'm using software as a service, or I'm using cloud-based content platforms for newer applications, newer line of businesses. Maybe I'm doing this in a phased approach, but I'm still working with many of my on-premises systems. So we expect to see that kind of phased approach continue over the next couple of years. And it's also interesting, when we talk to some of the more risk-averse roles in the information management space, a survey of some records management professionals, we found that there was actually a big leap back in 2017 in terms of acceptance of cloud-based applications for business records retention applications. So up to 30% now are using that in the cloud, up from 19% in our previous survey of that role. So what does this also mean in terms of moving into digital business? Where does cloud play a role here? I think one of the really interesting kind of quiet disruptors in this broader content management market has been the need to embrace what I've been calling the extended enterprise, and that's that trusted kind of inner circle of the consultants, the law firms, design agencies, customers, partners, suppliers that we all know that we work with in terms of our content, our approvals. We're co-creating materials. We're reviewing each other's agreements. And cloud really plays an important role in supporting that business to business or business to customer or even citizen and public sector content sharing, secure collaboration. We're moving away from email as our primary transport mechanism for documents and files, and we're now seeing a lot of interest in kind of that co-creation of content and documents, approvals, in cloud-based applications. So expect this to continue to drive interest in cloud and the capabilities to open up to that extended enterprise. Over half, and we've been running this question in our survey year over year, over half want some form of external access to a content application. So maybe it's for a partner supplier portal, maybe it's for trusted contractors, consultants, other people that we bring into our business to kind of supplement our workforce, or maybe it is for customers and partners. So again, continued interest in that year over year. And the use cases that are top of mind are things like collaboration with contractors, agencies, consultants, or distribution of marketing, sales, technical support materials. So consistent information being delivered around that whole customer life cycle. So that business-to-business use case continues to drive interest. And, if we think about that importance, that expectation of our extended enterprise, what do our customers or citizens actually expect from us in terms of how we handle, store, protect information? I think GDPR is actually a fantastic, very tangible example of that more empowered customer that we know that organizations need to pay attention to. This actually puts some regulatory teeth behind organizations that are collecting, storing, sharing, using information, and gives that empowered customer the ability to ensure that their data is handled appropriately. So just, in terms of some wrap-up notes here, when we think about our content management roadmap and the place of cloud in terms of taking us to that next level of digital business for our particular organization, we really encourage organizations to think kind of holistically, think horizontally. What is that flow of information, not just from team to team or employee to employee inside your own business, but also potentially in and out of your business, with that trusted circle of stakeholders that live externally, the consultants, the customers, the suppliers? Where do the documents, the data, the metadata flow across those core business processes? Understand the role of those external participants, and look at cloud as one of the ways to solve some of the traditional problems that prevented a lot of that secure, consistent collaboration and co-creation in older versions of Generation 1 ECM products. And again, of course, when you're looking at that cloud strategy, making sure you're finding that right mix of vendors and services that are going to balance the needs of your busy information workers, the business users, who want fantastic user experiences, modern look and feel, simpler content applications, but also make sure you're looking at the vendors that understand the compliance and security requirements, especially for global or regulated businesses. So with that, I'll turn it over to David until the Q&A section.
Thank you very, very much, Cheryl. And Cheryl and Forrester have a very deep perspective based on, as she said, their in-depth surveys they do of many, many customers. IBM has a perspective based on our customers who have been implementing these, and I have a great job in that I get to coordinate with our customers. I call myself a community builder for our events or for case studies and webcasts and so on. So I meet a lot of customers, I hear a lot of customer stories, and I pick some out that I think demonstrate pretty well what Cheryl has just laid out for us. And so we can look at how this is playing out in the real world. The first thing to start with, though, is that the market has been demanding an integrated set of solutions, the elimination of silos, the connecting of the back office to the front office, the acceleration of processes, and all for better customer experience, as Cheryl pointed out. So in 2018, IBM announced an integrated portfolio that we call the IBM Digital Business Automation Platform. And it brings together, as you can see, tasks, that's robotic process automation, content, workflow, decisions, that business rules, and with Capture, across the top, sort of feeding it all. And what I want to focus on, I mean, most of these have a cloud component to them, but what I want to focus on today are the content solutions that are in the cloud. There might be a little Capture mention and some workflow as well, but pretty much taking a deep look at content applications. So here's the first story I want to tell you about, and this is a South American social services agency. Didn't want me to use their name, but they were one of the early content on cloud customers. Now, they embraced it because of the pricing model, paying monthly rather than a large upfront capital expense, and you'll see that's a factor in a lot of the stories that we have to tell. Traditional ECM users have tended to be, large organizations with big IT departments managing big projects, and that's not a description of this organization. And then the other factor, though, so they really enjoyed this idea of that low IT involvement. The other factor is the region of the world that they're in has a lot of earthquakes, and they had actually had some issues losing records and documents because of earthquakes. So when they knew that they could set up data centers in Brazil and Mexico City for disaster recovery, well, then they were sold. So here it's agility and cost that really drive this particular application. Here's a story that I really enjoy talking about, another non-traditional ECM user, but it's really exciting because Blueprint Genetics is a small DNA testing company in Europe and North America, and they set out to disrupt the DNA testing business and use technology, our technology, to do it. So they put Case Manager in the cloud with Watson Text Analytics and some other intelligence to help orchestrate the DNA scientists and provide quick search into medical literature and the various knowledge that they might need to help resolve DNA tests. They cut the industry standard in half, from 30 days to 14 days. And so if you ask why cloud, well, they don't have an IT department. All right, here's if you're eating, if you're tearing into a bag of fast food right now while you're listening today, chances are good that you're tasting the food from one of the franchises of this particular company. Again, not a traditional ECM user. yet they wanted to manage their critical content, their back office content like accounts payable and HR, but also company assets like recipes, secret sauces and so forth. So they wanted to protect that. And as all AIIM members know, the best way to protect content is put it under management with an ECM system and control who has access and what they can see. And so they work with our partner Dayhuff Group to design and deploy. So this is a classic example of the line of business driving the sale and driving the decision, and very happy to outsource that technology piece. One more small company that I wanted to talk about is a Power Cooperative from Alabama and Florida with about 2 people in IT. They engaged with our partner EnChoice, and they designed and integrated a platform really that included capture, case management, and content in the cloud, but tightly integrated to all of their ERP, their geo systems, their HR systems, and they stepped into the world of modern ECM. So our partner tells a story about one of the things this user has to do is when they're managing power lines out in the field, hey, somebody might come out and say, get off my land. Well, they need to be able to show them the deeds and the right-of-way documents that they have. It once took a month to locate a deed in a government office building somewhere. Once they had the system up and running, they were able to do a search in 30 seconds and find the same document. So results are, great availability to the people who need to do the work when they need it. Great cost savings here, 60% operating cost savings. And again, an IT department of 2, and yet they have a world-class ECM system. But it's not just smaller companies now. So I've got a lot of examples of large financial services companies and government agencies, sort of the traditional ECM user who have adopted a cloud, and some of them for development and test environments, as Cheryl pointed out, sort of testing the waters and trying, and others with some new line of business applications that sort of extend and expand from the traditional space. So great example here for that. In this case, this is a bank based in the United Kingdom, so GDPR became a huge issue, as you know, in May this year. So yes, they're getting operating cost savings. They received that customer experience benefit of getting new customers onboarded much faster, but they couldn't and wouldn't have done any of it unless they had the degree of rigor that the ECM system offered them to be able to stay compliant with that General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and to be able to control how data is managed, how it's responsive to what the customer requires and wants, and how data is protected. So this really speaks to the need for a real fine-grained, sophisticated system in the cloud, real ECM. And so one more, and this is the external sharing story. We've seen a number of use cases, but as Cheryl just told us, collaboration with partners and key contractors is a key use case. Well, here's the story. They have several use cases for external sharing, but the one that really I think stands out, and I've heard from other insurers, is investigations into claim fraud. So a disability claimant, for example, who may be completely healthy, and so if they can investigate and find that out, they might be able to avoid some fraud. And so their external sharing capability connects investigators who are independent and outside the firewall with their internal fraud specialists and help them work together to gather the evidence, to share it and secure it. So investigators can submit documents, images, videos is a huge part of this. They're hiding in the bushes taking a picture of somebody who's quite healthy. I don't want to get into all the silliness of it all, but there is a lot of video in this. So it's all secure and compliant within a long list of regulations that pertain to insurance. So why cloud? Well, they were working before with overnight mail, with large files on USB drives, with hard copy photographs, and this is certainly much more effective way to work, and they're able to resolve these investigations much quicker. And so for the public service part of our piece here, just to close out, we recently announced a new offering called Business Automation Content Services on Cloud, and it's built on that FileNet platform that has been around 30 years now, with the user interface we call Content Navigator. And it's public cloud, single tenant. It's got all the security and privacy that these large organizations need. And the Docker container piece is really one that is hard to overlook its importance. We have seen new instances of this product up and running in about 15 minutes with Docker containers. And if you go back 5 or 10 years, there'd be a half a tractor trailer truck had to back up to your office with a pile full of CDs to install this stuff. So that is actually probably one of the most astonishing parts about this, is how much easier it is to deploy. Now, they're pretty complex systems. There's a lot of connecting to other systems as well, but we're seeing provisioning, within a business week. Lots of different ways to use these development tests or production environments. Obviously, it's IBM, 24/7 support. The disaster recovery and high availability story is great. And a usage-based subscription model that customers are really, really happy about. And a user portal. And that is something that really makes customers, they're able to go in and do administration, but also open up different instances and do a content application, but maybe move to a workflow application. So I'd love you to learn more about it. And we have a link here for you to go and check out and see some demos, a guided tour, a hands-on lab of our content product, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. It's pretty much identical, and you'll be able to experience it if you go to this link. I think the link is also in the On24 user experience here probably up in the upper right. So there you go. I think it's time to go to Q&A, and I'm going to kick it back over to Teresa.
Thank you. And you've been listening to David Janess of IBM. And yes, this resource link here is available. You can click on that right now in the resources, from the resources list to the right of the slide area. And before David, we've been listening to Cheryl McKinnon of Forrester Research. And so we do have a few questions that have been coming in, and please continue to submit your questions. We'll get to many of these as we can. And one question I wanted to start off with, and Cheryl, the person had asked the question earlier in an early part of the presentation when you were talking about external collaboration, and this person's asking, does better content sharing imply external collaboration outside of the business with vendors? Cheryl?
Yep. No, sorry. I was just had to unmute there for a second. So that is certainly one of the use cases. We are seeing increasingly that the kind of typical work habits in terms of if we're going to be working jointly with it's a vendor that we're working with, we're going to go back and forth on a contract or scope of work. Typically we've been doing versions of documents and emailing them back and forth. And I think that way of working is kind of recognized as being kind of open to a lot of errors and missing the last version, and who's got the latest and greatest. And so with the evolution of some of these content management platforms, especially those that are investing in some of their collaboration services and adding in things like secure file sharing, this opens up an opportunity to kind of work cohesively with an external vendor, for example, have that secure document workspace. We can all see, who's made the last change, even some very simplistic task management. So we're seeing more of that coming into some of the cloud-based products. And, I think that opens the door to a lot more consistency around that collaboration and content sharing process with external parties, whether it's vendors or, other kind of trusted suppliers or contractors.
Okay, thank you. And another quick question for you, Cheryl. Towards the end part of your presentation, when you were listing all of the fabulous charts that you have from your research, someone was just asking if those numbers do include government and private industry, include the government and private industry together, or was that those stats just coming from private industry?
Yes, I think all of the data that I presented, both from my own ECM survey, so these are surveys I do every year with customers that read our research in that area or log inquiry questions with us. That includes both private and public sector, as well as some of the larger data surveys that Forrester's Data ARM does, where we survey thousands of decision makers. Those are all industries, all regions. So I didn't segment those by vertical or by country or anything like that. Those are global.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. It's always helpful. I have another question here, and I'm going to start this off with David, but Cheryl, please feel free to join in. Because Cheryl did touch on talking about security, the information security with being in the cloud. David, if we can start with you, how do we evaluate the security in a cloud content solution?
Yeah, excellent question, and one that comes up every time, I think, in this kind of a conversation. And I've kind of boiled it down to 6 key areas that you want to ask about when you look into cloud solutions. So first, 1, is it an isolated environment? Has each client have their own environment? They're not sharing databases or virtual machines or software servers. So you certainly need to have that. Is data encrypted? So is all data at rest encrypted to, and there's standards, there's a whole lot of acronyms around it, FIPS 142, I don't put everybody to sleep, but just make sure that is also in place. Has the cloud hosting company done penetration testing? In other words, have they hired a bunch of punk hackers to, actually there's companies, I think they're the ones that hire the punk hackers, but have they had a third party try to penetrate, and what kind of reports have come out of that? And that's something all big cloud hosting companies do regularly. User authentication, very important. And so can you have that self-service user management for the access, password management, single sign-on, all of that? Make sure those pieces are in place. And then are there operational procedures with this cloud vendor? And again, a whole bunch of acronyms, and GDPR is just one of them, and ISO and SSA. There's a number of standards that need to be in place, and you just want to make sure that they are. And then finally, number 6, do you have secure connectivity? So is all communication encrypted to these FIPS standards? Sometimes do you need VPN for secure outbound connection to systems of record and so forth. But secure connectivity would be number 6. So if you can ask those 6 questions and get satisfactory answers, I think you're off to a good start.
Yeah, I think I'd just add to that, we've got some great checklists that I often will send our customers, when they're assessing a cloud vendor for content management. Also things like, are there, third-party auditors, that kind of inspect their internal processes, make sure that they've got clearly defined processes and they're sticking to it. Certainly a lot of the certifications that David mentioned, what's the kind of the security of the physical premises of their data center. And, again, if there's any kind of requirement, like what's kind of the shielding between your content and data and employees of the data center. So, do they need access for, troubleshooting purposes, and if there is any access, are things being logged appropriately so that there's full transparency in terms of, who has access to the data and so on. But, I certainly find that when I'm talking to ECM decision makers, they're working much more closely with their security professionals internally to ask better questions now than, what I heard, the earlier days, 4 or 5 years ago. Definitely the sophistication level has risen here.
It sounds like it was one of those questions where that could be its whole webinar into itself, because there's so much information to share about data security in the cloud. So thank you. I just want to mention a couple of other things here because I know we're getting close to the end of our webinar time, but hopefully if you still have more questions, send them in. Just want to mention a few other things here, and specifically want to talk briefly about AIIM's new training program on emerging technologies, and this covers artificial intelligence and machine learning, robotic process automation, blockchain, and yes, what we have been talking about today, the cloud. So follow the link in the resources for the emerging technology training information, or just go to aim.org/training to learn more. And also we have coming up in next Thursday on August 2nd, putting together a multi-hour virtual event, and going to have close to a dozen speakers, 10 or 12 speakers coming in, talking about all of these different emerging technology areas. So if you go to the events page on AIIM's website, or there's the link here to find out more and to register for this free 4-hour virtual event on your ultimate guide for emerging technologies. And just as we are coming to the end of our webinar time, wanted to remind everyone that we've been recording this webinar. Invite you to come back, listen to it again, invite your colleagues to listen to this. Don't forget to download the resources. That survey is going to open, and if not, please just click on it now so that you can take that, because I really do value your feedback. I also want to thank our underwriter, IBM. Without the support from our solution providers, AIIM would not be able to bring you these free educational programs. So thank you for your sponsorship and support. And very much want to thank Forrester Research for Cheryl McKinnon's time here today. And I always value hearing everything you have to share because it's always a good talk. So as we do come to this close, I want to ask each of our speakers for their closing thought or a key takeaway. And let's begin first with Cheryl McKinnon, your closing thoughts today.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm recognizing that organizations are at various stages of their own shift to digital business and, how they might define digital transformation for their own requirements. But, cloud really is bringing some fascinating opportunities in terms of, accelerating innovation, taking advantage of a lot of really interesting, as you mentioned, emerging technologies. I mean, a lot of the cloud providers are investing in their own, cognitive services, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and, this is certainly a path to the future that cloud-based content management is going to be able to leverage.
Thank you, Cheryl. And David Janess of IBM, your closing thoughts.
Well, I say it's been fantastic to watch the momentum around cloud in the ECM content services space over the past few years. As Cheryl pointed out, the SaaS model was sort of the first wave, and now we're seeing all these new capabilities coming online from sort of core ECM capabilities like cloud object storage and worm storage and collaboration and easy-to-use portals and right around the corner are low-code solution tools, and it's really starting to happen very quickly. Users have been demanding that these tools get easier to use and faster to deploy for quite a while, and here it is. It's happening. It feels like it really is a tipping point, and it's a pretty exciting time in the business.
That it is, David. So thank you, everyone, for your time today. For AIIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we will see you with our next webinar. And have a good afternoon.